Okay, in this video we're going to make an HTML template. So anytime you're working with HTML, there's a setup, a general configuration that your file is going to take on. You're going to need all of these elements to really just get started writing HTML. So it's good to memorize all these, but it's also good to have a template that you can just pull up really quickly and get started working with HTML. All right, so we're going to make this template. I have Atom, my text editor, open on my desktop. I have included the desktop folder as part of my project, and now I'm just going to make a new file on the desktop, and we'll call it template.html. And as we know, HTML files are just text documents, plain text, and so I'm going to add the first element, which this is an artifact of the evolution of HTML, and it specifies what version of HTML we're using. So the document type, the doc type. And so this tag's a little bit different than any of the other tags we use. It has exclamation point doc type, and then for HTML5, which is the version we're using, you just add the attribute HTML to that. Okay, so that's the doc type, and then we have the beginning of our HTML document with the HTML tag. Now the HTML tag has a couple of attributes you probably want to add. The first one is language, okay, and in this case we're going to specify EN for English. That lets the browser know what language to expect, and that's important for translating software. So at other points in your document, if you have certain sections of text that are in other languages, you can specify on that tag a language as well, and that way the browser is aware that there's a different language there, and it can offer to translate. And there's various other utilities to that. Okay, so specify the language on the outer HTML document, and that's the default for the whole page. And then one other thing to specify is the direction of that language, right? So this is a left to right language, and this is handy because as you design the site, we're designing it for a left to right language, and if we change this to right to left to another language that is right to left, some of the elements will swap. Right? It's built into HTML, so it makes designing the page a little bit easier. We won't probably get into much of that. All right, so we have our first real HTML element here, and it is the HTML element, and there are two children to this element: the head tag. And the head tag mostly has to do with metadata of the page itself. So nothing in the head tag is actually displayed on the page. There is an item that is displayed, but it's on the tab of the browser. So if you want the text on the tab of the browser to display something, you add the title tag inside of the head. Right, and we'll just call this template. Okay. And the other tag that you need to have inside of the head is the meta tag, and specify the character set, charset UTF-8. This can be uppercase or lowercase, it doesn't matter. And I like to self-close all my tags, or just close them all. HTML you don't have to, but especially starting out, I think it's a good thing to close all of your tags, even if they don't need to be closed, because that ensures that you know that this element does not have any children. So you can't possibly confuse that because it's self-closing. So you know by looking at it that it doesn't have any children. Okay, and so we've got the meta tag, the title, and now that sort of completes the head tag for now. And we have the body tag, which is the body of our page. Anything that goes inside of the body tag is actually rendered and displayed on the page. So body. Okay. And just to start out, we'll add an H1 and say template /H1. So that adds a little heading. Okay, so we've got enough here where we can test this to make sure that it's working. You don't want to add too much code before you test, because then there's a number of things that could go wrong, and it's hard to tell what's gone wrong. So add a little bit of code and then test. Okay, and so we'll open this up, and we've got this template here, right? And so we see template showed up here in the title, and template here in the main body. Okay, so this isn't really enough to justify making a template file. We can do all of this pretty easily, but there are a few other things that we're going to want to add commonly, right? So one of those things might be CSS. We're going to add some styles to our page, and we might add them directly into this document, right, using the style tag. Right? And in the style tag, because it's a sort of different language, right? It's using CSS. I like to unindent when I'm working inside of the style tag, and I unindent all the way back to the beginning of the indentation of the document. And I'll add the comment characters for CSS. And this is the CSS section. And then I'll also duplicate that line and add an ending point for that. And then you can, as you like, add some extra length. But this is kind of nice because as you're scrolling through, you can see these, or in your mini map view, you can see where these comments are and kind of get an idea of where you are in the document. Okay, so in here, it's common that we're going to want to do something with the body, right? And so background color, and we'll just set that something to off-white just to start with. Okay. And we'll close that file in Atom and open it back up, and it adds the colorization. We can refresh the page, and we see the color slightly changed. So the CSS is working. All right. Another thing you might want to do is create or link to a CSS style sheet. Right? Instead of creating your styles within this style tag, you might want a separate document for that. Okay, so we might want to create a new file, and we can call this styles.css. Right? And in here, I could put body, text, or color, red. All right. And then if I want to link the contents of this document, this style sheet, into my HTML, I can use the link tag. Okay, I'm going to use the link HTML element and add the attribute REL, which stands for relationship. The relationship of this document that I'm including is a style sheet. So that's the relationship of the document that I'm including to this HTML document. Right? Link relative style sheet. And then I also need to add the href to this document. Okay, so this styles.css file is in the same directory as my template.html file, so I don't need to specify any long paths. I can just type styles.css. All right, and again, you'll see me self-close the link. You reload, and we see both of these styles are being rendered. Okay, the contents of style.css, styles.css, and then body. That's defined right here in the style tag. Now what happens if they both define a background color? Okay. So in the styles, background color black, we reload it, and you see the background color remained the same. Now, if we bring this link down after we've defined our styles, we reload, now we see it does apply. So basically, the way it works is the last one you define in order of as if you're reading the document in order, right? This style tag is read first, right? And so it sets the background color. But then this style sheet is loaded, and the styles in here overwrite any existing styles that we already had. Okay, so that's important to recognize. All right, so for the majority of this, I'm just going to keep the styles.css empty, but you can include this if you would like. All right, so what I'm going to do is add an HTML comment. Okay, so that's the HTML comment character sequence. Right, this is the beginning of the comment, and this is the only one that's similar to the doc type, but you have less than symbol, exclamation point, hyphen, hyphen. So you have to have all 4 of those characters, and it begins an HTML comment, and to end the HTML comment is hyphen, hyphen, greater than symbol. Okay, and so if you wanted to include the style sheet, in Atom or most text editors, there's a shortcut to try to uncomment a line, and you just type that in uncomments, or you can comment it out. All right, so we're just going to stick to this style section, and if we want to, we can uncomment this link. All right, and I just moved this line of code up above the styles that are explicitly defined here in this HTML file. All right, so speaking of the link, the link tag, what we're going to add here is an icon, right? We see we have a little icon here. This is kind of the default icon for Google Chrome. If you don't specify one, well, we want to specify our own. So the relationship of what we're linking here is an icon, right? And then what we want to link is a picture of some kind. And again, I'm going to self-close this. So we have the href to some sort of picture. And commonly when you're working with HTML, you're going to have the need for some sort of placeholder image. The image is not actually what you want to use, but you need some image to look at while you're designing the site. So this comes up a lot. There's a nice website called placekitten.com, and we all know the internet's made for cats. So placekitten.com, and what you can do is in the URL, you can specify the width and the height of an image, and it will generate an image of that width and height of a cat for you. And you can just use this as you're developing HTML files. So we have, 50 by 50, right? Or you can make them larger, 500 by 650, and it will generate a picture of that size. So the first one, again, this is X and then Y, so your width and then your height. So for our little icon here, we can see these are really small. Commonly, you'll want something pretty tiny, so like 24 should get us. And you probably won't even be able to see much of what it is, but it is an image, and it's a JPEG image, and we can just include it as a placeholder, just so we remember how to add that icon, right? So we'll copy this URL and paste it in here. And we refresh our template page, and we see we've got that little kitten icon up there, so that's nice. So we've linked style sheet. We've got that commented out right now. We've got an actual style section, right? What if we want to include some JavaScript? Okay, it's common to want to include JavaScript in your website or web application. If you're going to include JavaScript that is meant to run after your page is loaded, it's common to, within the body tag, create a scripts tag, and it's at the very bottom of body, and then close the script tag. Okay. The reason we do it here is because it ensures all of these other HTML elements, everything in the body, has already been rendered or read and written to the DOM within the browser. So these elements exist. Whereas it used to be people would add the script element inside of head, which if you're adding a library or something like that, you might want to do that. But anything that has to run and is meant to run after the page is loaded, you generally want to do this inside the body tag at the very last item. The last child of the body tag is where you have a script tag. And again, similar to the style tag, I like to unindent and go all the way back to the beginning of the page indentation, because JavaScript can nest rather deeply sometimes. So we want as much indentation space as possible. So again, I'll add a little indicator that we've started JavaScript here, and this is more or less just visual, right? I scroll up here, make sure it's the same length, Yes. Okay. So this is just a visual indicator. As we scroll through our document, we see that and we know we've gotten to the JavaScript. And then I can make another one and call it in JavaScript. This isn't necessary. It's just, again, a visual thing. Right? So we've got in JavaScript console.log. Okay, and we have a little message that runs starting application. Okay, so I refresh my page, and if I access the developer tools on this browser, this is Google Chrome, you can go to the settings, more tools, and developer tools. You can see there's a shortcut for it that works on most browsers, so I've memorized the shortcut. Control-Shift-I opens up your developer tools. All right, and here in console, this is the output of our JavaScript console. All right, we have a little warning message here that's associated with referencing images that are not part of our actual hosting service, right? So we're just creating a document on our desktop and we're referencing an image somewhere else, right? So it's just a little warning telling us that, but we can ignore that for now. All right. So, but we do see console.log starting application executed properly. All right, so that's if we have JavaScript within our HTML document. But sometimes you might not want to have JavaScript within your HTML document. Right? You might want to include JavaScript, an external file like we did up here. Right? So there's two possible places to include JavaScript in that capacity. Right? If you're including a library, so somebody else's third-party work, a set of tools and utilities for JavaScript, generally it's suggested that you include that inside of the head tag. Right? So we'll add that underneath. Actually, we'll do that just above the style tag. It doesn't matter exactly where you do it. I'm going to try to add it just above the style tag there. That way the style is the last thing in our head tag. All right. And so here we have a script tag, right? And we use src, and we specify the URL of the script that we would like to include. All right. So commonly, I could have another file in here. Right? I can create a new file and call it main.js or app.js. There's a common name for that. Right? And the source is app.js. Right? And the script tag cannot be self-closing. So you have /script. Okay? So this one is unique. You're not allowed to self-close that one. All right, so we look in app.js, and I can put a little console.log message in here, and this should run running app.js. All right, and again, we can reload our page and take a look at that. Oops, there we go. Reload that page. And we see that executed first. The app.js file was actually defined in the HTML document before anything else, so it ran first. So at this point in time, none of these elements down here have been rendered onto the page, and so for all practical purposes, they don't exist. So this, whatever you include up here, can't need to be aware of anything in the body of your page. All right. So this is one place you could add a script tag, right? But normally this is where you would add, instead of app.js, you might add a library, like somebody else's third-party tools. So let's take a minute and look at CDN.js. So a CDN is a content delivery network, and JS is JavaScript. So this site allows you to include different versions of different software, different JavaScript software from lots of different vendors, right? So a common one is Lodash. If we look at Lodash, we can find all of these different versions of Lodash, and Lodash has several extensions, right? What you can do is this is how you would actually download this file, and I can include this. So I can copy the script tag like that and go to my document and just paste it in here. right? And it writes the script tag for you. It includes the source, and then it has an integrity check. This part is important for if you're including external software, right? This makes sure if someone intercepts and takes control of the CDN.js server and they modify this code to run on your page, they could do something malicious. This integrity check makes sure that the file that you're expecting to receive matches this integrity check, and if it doesn't, it won't run the code. All right, so that part is important if you're using any kind of files that you aren't in charge of, right? So if we wanted to include Lodash, we can include it here. So again, in the head, that's often where you'll include a lot of your libraries, third-party stuff, anything that doesn't need to know about the actual elements on your page, right? Down below, as the last element of your body tag, that's where you would start running the main application. So if we didn't want to have the actual JavaScript tags and actually write the JavaScript within our HTML file, we could include that separately. We could have something up here, which would be like we had up there, the script tag. Oops. Script source app.js. And again, the script tag cannot be self-closed. All right. There we go. So if I refresh the page now, same thing. Nothing really changes, even though we changed a little bit. But running app.js is displayed first because it's encountered first, and then starting application, this second script tag is run after that because it's encountered after that. So that ordering is important, right? And so we'll do the same thing here. Also we can see that Lodash has been loaded. The underscore is a variable that's set with Lodash. I can say underscore dot map. That's a function. Lodash dot map. There we go. So that's a function that maps an object to a function. There's lots of different functions associated with Lodash, but we see that this character is now defined in the global context, where otherwise if we hadn't included the Lodash, which we can go ahead and do that, we'll comment that out, and we'll see that we can't access that underscore variable. All right, so we go back up here, and again, HTML comment, right, and it just comments out that inclusion, reload the page, and we see that underscore dot map underscore is not defined, right? So that variable name of underscore got defined by the library when we included it in our document, right? So we'll leave that unchecked for now, or commented out. And over here we don't actually really need this script tag, so we'll leave that commented out, right? And so we've got basic CSS that we're going to want in all of our HTML pages, and then some basic JavaScript that we're going to want in all of our HTML pages. All right. So real quick, let's get rid of this h1 tag. Or we'll keep it. We'll give it a class name. Class equals page heading, or we'll make this the ID rather. ID page heading. And then here in JavaScript, we'll say document.get element by ID. And the ID is page heading. And we just made that up. It's whatever you decide here. So usually you'll use kebab case or hyphen case when you make IDs and classes. That's generally the convention. All right, and then get element by ID page heading. So this is going to give us an element, and I can say that's basically this H tag, and I can change what's inside of it. I can say inner text is equal to my template. Okay, so it's going to change the text from template, which is what's originally defined in there, to my template. Now what's important to note here is this document.getElement by ID, we are grabbing this element, so it's important that this element exists in the document. If we ran this JavaScript beforehand, this element would not yet exist, so we wouldn't be able to grab it. That's why it's so important to have the JavaScript at the end of your body tag. Okay, so we can reload that, and we see it changed the text there to my template. Okay, another way to do that, more convenient in some ways, is the document.querySelector. And query selector selects one element with the associated query selector. So we know from CSS the ID query selector. If we're looking for an element with an ID, we use the pound symbol or hash, and then page heading. Text. Template. Alright, and so we can reload that page and we see that that works. So besides the inner text, it's common to have a main div. And we'll say class main or app or something like that, and we have template inside. We can reload this and see that it doesn't change anything, but I can add one more query selector down here, document.querySelector, and I'm going to select the class dot app. Now, query selector only grabs the first item it encounters in the page that has the class app. If you want to select multiples, you can use all, and query selector all returns all of the elements in an array. Okay, we just want one because there is only one, and we're looking for the app. Right, and then instead of changing the inner text here, what I can do is I can change the inner HTML, and I can change the entire innards of this app dot this div here. So right now the innards of this div, the content, is another HTML tag, and it's an H1 tag. What we can do is we can change that. We can say inner HTML and set that equal to something else. To make it obvious, we'll make it an H3 tag that says template HTML /H3. Okay, so now this text is going to be injected into this div, right? And it's going to be rendered as if it's HTML. So the H3 tag is going to be passed through the browser, and the browser is going to recognize that and render it as it would render any other H3 tag. Okay, so we'll save this and we'll reload this, and we see the H3 tag is applied. So this is template HTML. Okay, and then as for the common CSS items we might want to add, it's common to have on the body a background color, but specifically there's always a div or a bit of margin, right? And in most cases you're almost always going to want to get rid of that margin. So margin 0. I like to add position absolute. We add top 0, left 0. What this does is it renders this body tag. It's going to render at an absolute positioning in the viewport of the browser, and we're going to start at top is 0 and left is 0. And then we have a width and a height of 100% of the parent element. So width 100% and height 100%. And if you set this up, it makes things a little bit easier, because our body element, the beginning sort of our actual page, actually has a height and width of 100% of the viewport. Okay, so that can make some calculations a little bit easier. All right, so now you see we have sort of a basic HTML template. We can import additional items, but this is kind of a lot of code to write every single time. So if you have this, you can delete the items that you don't want to use, just copy this file and delete any items that you don't want, and you're good to go. You're ready to get started coding in some HTML. All right, so reload the page, and we see that margin went away there. All right, so that's how you can make a nice HTML5 template to get started.